They blamed him. They mocked him. And then they cast him out from the gate he had guarded for nearly 10 years. No one asked if he was okay. No one checked the truth. All it took was age, a hunched back, a slow gait, and a pair of cracked shoes for the world to assume he was the problem. A letter of dismissal, a few chuckles behind his back, and he walked away without complaint. 7 years later, the very student who once laughed at him would be the one to make the entire school stand in silence. Not because Walter Hayes became famous, but because they finally realized that all those years, they had mocked a man who had once laid his life on the line for people just like them. Every morning, before the sun dried the dew on the stone steps, a quiet figure would appear at the side gate of Riverside High School. His name was Walter Hayes. He was 76, a name few students knew, and if they did, it was only from short videos online overlaid with silly music, framed with sarcastic captions. He wore a pale gray canvas jacket so worn that you could see the frayed seams in the right light. His black leather shoes were cracked, bent, and worn so thin they no longer followed a straight line. His back curved slightly, but his posture remained straight as if it had once been drilled into him with barked commands and blood-soaked boots. At exactly 5:45 every morning, he arrived carrying a ring of old keys, a duty logbook with faded lines, and a ritual no one had asked of him, sweeping wet leaves from the path, propping up fallen bikes, checking every corner of the schoolyard before the first bell rang. He nodded to each student as they passed. Most of them didn't nod back. Some looked through him, others smirked, a few whispered under their breath, "Is he still alive? This guy moves like he's buffering. Bet those shoes were government issued in World War II. A group of juniors made a whole page about him. They posted clips of him bending down to pick up trash, struggling to push open the heavy steel gate, or sitting beneath a tree, trying to catch his breath. They added music, they added captions, "Slow life with Grandpa Gatekeeper. When your alarm clock has rust." Riverside High's legendary NPC. Those videos spread faster than any school-wide announcement, and like every cheap joke, no one took them down. No one said a word. One day, while sweeping near the cafeteria, a student politely asked Walter for the time. Walter smiled, reached into his coat, pulled out a battered old wristwatch, and adjusted his glasses to squint at the face. That moment became a meme within hours. This watch probably saw the JFK assassination. The caption read, "It racked up over 10,000 laughing reactions." Walter never saw it. He didn't need to. He heard the whispers when he passed classrooms, heard the half-suppressed laughter when he leaned on his broom in the summer heat. He heard the quiet cruelty behind casual remarks. He probably still works 'cause he's broke. Nobody needs him anymore, so he's cleaning up after kids. But Walter never said a word, never answered back, never asked for kindness. Because to him, dignity wasn't something you demanded. You carried it, especially when no one else could see it. Let me know if you'd like the next part of the story. One drizzly morning, he still showed up on time. Wearing a thin plastic raincoat with a torn sleeve, he stood alone at the gate, broom in hand, eyes fixed on the raindrops pooling on the gray bricks. A student walked by, not a greeting, just silently raised a phone to record. The caption that followed: "When you're level 76 but haven't unlocked retirement yet." The video was shared with cartoonish background music and comments like, "NPC resetting script after 2023 update." Someone else added, "Can the school replace him already? Such a downer in the morning." No one knew that morning Walter had a fever. No one noticed his hands were shaking so badly he dropped the logbook onto the wet concrete. No one stopped to ask, "Are you okay?" Because to them, he was just the old gatekeeper, just another fixture of the school grounds like the rusted flagpole or that dying tree near the cafeteria. There, but forgettable. No one asked his name. No one knew what he used to do. And no one ever wondered why a man nearing 80 still showed up every morning at dawn, silently unlocking the school gates for hundreds of children, none of whom ever truly remembered his face. Men like Walter Hayes fade into the backdrop in a world where speed, aesthetics, and youth are glorified. These are just outdated memories, No one imagined that. Behind that stooped back once stood a soldier between gunfire and orders. No one knew those calloused hands had defused live mines in the dark to save an entire unit. All they saw was the surface old coat, slow steps, cracked shoes, and they laughed. The older you look, the easier it is to become someone's joke. His full name was Walter Samuel Hayes. The school's personnel file read, Security Staff, started March 2011. No commendations, no resume on file, no one asked, and he never offered. Everyone knew him as the old guard, quiet, outdated, and odd. But no one knew that before he picked up a broom to open school gates. He once held a rifle charging through Middle Eastern jungles, once lay silent for 19 hours underground into Crit to maintain signal contact for his entire team. Walter Hayes was once a colonel commander of an elite special ops unit, serving nearly 4 decades in the military. He was deployed to places only referred to in code names places, as he jokingly told a student once, hotter than your classrooms. No one at school had seen the circular scar on his right arm, a bullet wound from a hostage rescue mission in 1987. No one realized the black shoes he wore daily were old combat boots, boots that had once trudged through the icy borders of Ukraine and the burning sands of Fallujah. He never told anyone, never brought it up. Not once did he boast or try to appear important. Instead, he chose to live quietly a way of living that might seem outdated in a world obsessed with spotlight and applause. Every afternoon, when the schoolyard emptied, he would walk the hallways, picking up bits of paper left behind and folding them carefully into his pocket. When no one was looking, he would patch up students' bicycles using the old toolkit he kept from his time in the military. Once, on a rainy day, he quietly slipped a small bag of bread and a carton of milk into a child's backpack who always sat alone in the corner of the cafeteria. He knew her parents were going through a divorce, and she didn't have breakfast money that month. When a poor girl's bicycle brake broke, he silently removed the brake from his bike and installed it on hers. The next day, she never knew how her bike had magically been fixed, but he did, and he never waited for a thank you. He once said to the former principal, the only person who had ever asked why he applied to be a security guard, I didn't know how to sit still after leaving the military. And here, every morning, I still get to do what I've always known, guard a gate. It's just that this gate opens to classrooms, not combat zones. Most people saw him as a piece of school furniture, always there, unchanging, silent. But they didn't see him walking home each evening, his back slightly bent, a faded cloth bag in hand, stepping past the worn-down apartment block where he'd lived since 2002. They didn't know he'd been alone since his wife passed. No children, no close relatives. They didn't know he polished his old shoes every night and set them neatly on the rack as if preparing for something important tomorrow. Walter Hayes didn't need people to know who he was. He had lived through times when staying silent was more important than staying alive. But that didn't mean he had nothing left to say. Every morning, he unlocked the school gates. Every afternoon, he closed them after the last student had gone home. Yet Walter Hayes was never invited to stand with the faculty during morning assemblies. His name was never on the reception rotation board, even though he arrived earliest and left last. On Teacher Appreciation Day, when students gave flowers to everyone with a name tag, he received nothing because he didn't even have a name tag. To the students, he wasn't a part of the school. He was just that old gatekeeper, a fixture, a shadow, something there but unseen. Eventually, his real name disappeared from every conversation. They called him by nicknames mocking, half joking, half cruel, Rusty Alarm Clock, Riverside Grandpa, or, worse, the leaf-sweeping mummy. A group of seniors even turned it into a game, the Bravery Challenge. You'd get points if you passed by him 3 times without saying hello. One bold kid once snuck his gate keys and made a clip titled, Old Man Looking for His Youth, like it's a lost key. That video went viral on the school's private forum. No one was reprimanded. One morning, he was bent over, sweeping scraps of paper near the flame tree, when a group of students walked by. One muttered, "Why's this walking trash cannot retired yet?" The kid beside him burst out laughing, probably waiting for the school gate to open itself before he calls it quits. Walter didn't say anything. He just quietly gathered the last few bits of trash, straightened up, and turned away without a word. But no one noticed that in that exact moment, his eyes briefly glistened. He covered a rusted bicycle with a worn-out tarp on another rainy day. The bike had been sitting in the corner for months, forgotten, without a name or owner. A student passing by saw him and chuckled. "Whose bike is that?" Treating it like a treasure. What? Planning to ride it back to the war zone. It wasn't the words that stung him. It was the way they were said so carelessly, so thoughtlessly. People who've been through war, who've held lives in their hands, they learn how to endure. But what hurts the most isn't blood, bullets, or wounds. It's when the things they once protected with their lives are turned into punchlines. Still, Walter never complained, never told anyone. Every time someone mocked him, he just smiled. A quiet kind of smile belonged to a man who had long since learned how to survive by never letting others see the pain. In the late afternoons, after everyone had gone, he'd walk down the empty hallways, picking up candy wrappers and little scraps of paper, and then sit on the steps at the far end of the school building, not to nap, not out of sadness, just to sit there, like he was keeping watch over something no one else remembered existed. Once, a young teacher walked by and saw him sitting there. She quickly turned away, not because she was in a hurry, but because she didn't know how to greet him. "Hello." Security guard sounded odd. "Hello." Uncle felt awkward. "Hello, sir." She wasn't sure it was appropriate, so she just walked past him like a stranger. Even the new principal couldn't recall his name. When they crossed paths, it was just a nod, and in staff meetings, he was only called the Gatekeeper. No last name, no age, no history. Walter Hayes once, a colonel, once responsible for the lives of an entire unit, now stood quietly in a school courtyard where even his name had been forgotten. Wednesday morning, the air was damp and the wind was sharp, the weather that made people walk faster and talk less. Students trickled through the school gate, dragging the usual midweek sluggishness. Walter was there, like always, standing quietly with his right hand clutching the ring of old keys and his left hand resting lightly on his chest where a tightness lingered each time he drew a deep breath. The dry cough he'd had all week still hadn't gone away. At 6:55, the phone on the wall of the security office rang. Walter picked up. "Walter, report to the admin office immediately. Something needs to be cleared up." The voice was dry. "Clip no, please, no explanation." When he entered the room, 3 people were already seated, the vice principal, the cafeteria manager, and a maintenance staff member. No one offered him a seat. The vice principal pulled a sheet of paper from a folder and tapped it lightly against the desk. Nearly $200 went missing from the cafeteria drawer this morning. The door wasn't broken, just slightly ajar. No one else was on duty overnight but you. Walter stood silent for a few seconds. Then he spoke slowly, evenly. "I remember locking it, but maybe I forgot. It rained yesterday. I wasn't feeling well. My head wasn't clear." The vice principal raised an eyebrow. "So, you're admitting fault?" Walter nodded. No excuses, no finger pointing, not even a word of defense. No one in that room asked further questions. No one checked the backup camera angle. No one reviewed the schedule where the maintenance staff had slipped in a few minutes after the cafeteria closed. All they saw was an old gatekeeper, tired, worn down, and convenient. Too convenient to close the case on. That afternoon, the termination notice was signed. No warning, no official inquiry, just a single sheet of paper titled Employment Termination, Reason Failure to Ensure Property Security. When Walter received the notice, the vice principal couldn't even meet his eyes, and Walter didn't ask why. He simply nodded once, then stood and picked up his frayed canvas bag, the same one he'd used for nearly 10 years to carry his lunch, logbook, and the little radio playing classical music during his breaks. A few students passed by when he walked out of the school gate. One raised a phone to film. Another snorted with laughter. "Wait, he got fired." Another kid sneered. He probably purposely left it open, to steal the money himself. That laugh echoed behind Walter's footsteps as he walked along the worn brick path. No one knew he once crossed a river at midnight under enemy fire just to save a nurse trapped in the red zone. No one knew he once received a thank you letter written in blood from a young soldier who no longer had the strength to hold a pen. And no one knew. Walter had seen the one who took the money. It was a student, the very one who used to call him all those mocking nicknames. Walter saw him nervous hands, pale face, walking quickly after stuffing the bills into his jacket pocket. Walter saw it all, but he didn't say a word. He didn't report it. He didn't call the disciplinary board, because he knew that boy. He knew the family struggles, the quiet desperation behind those eyes that always seemed to challenge the world. And when the vice principal asked him directly, "Did anyone else enter the cafeteria?" he shook his head. Because some lives don't need to be exposed, they need to be mended. Because some kids make mistakes but still deserve a chance to make it right. And when someone later asked Walter, "Why did you take the blame?" he answered, in a voice rough like gravel scraped over stone, "Because I was forgiven once. 2. If no one had ever given me a second chance, I wouldn't be standing here today." That's where the story ended, or at least, that's where people thought it ended. 7 years. 7 years since Walter Hayes walked away from the gate he once unlocked every morning with a precise routine. He knew every click of the key. And since then, no one mentioned his name, no student ever asked, "Where did the old gatekeeper go?" No teacher ever paused in the hallway to wonder who swept the leaves now at noon. And in the staff memos, the name Walter Hayes faded, then disappeared completely as if he had never been there. The school had a new guard now. Younger, more energetic, fresh uniform. Security cameras are installed on every corner. Gates operated by ID scan. A facial recognition system logged every student and teacher. Everything looked more modern, more secure, except for one thing that was gone. The quiet presence of a man who stood behind everyone and never once let anyone fall. In another part of the city, about a 20-minute bus ride from the school, Walter lived in a small ground-floor apartment next to a laundromat. The room was barely 10 square meters, just enough for a folding bed, a low wooden tea table, a bookshelf lined with a few old military books, and the radio he turned on every morning to catch the news. He didn't host visitors, didn't use social media. Every morning, he still woke at 5 a.m. sharp, brewed his tea, polished the same old military boots that had faded with time, and walked around the nearby park, keeping alive the rhythm of a life he once knew. Sometimes, he'd pause at a child learning to ride a bike. Sometimes, he'd bend down to pick up a candy wrapper and drop it into a bin, though no one ever asked him to. No one there knew he had once held the rank of colonel in the military. No one knew he'd stood in operations too classified for news headlines. And no one remembered that he had once been the only school guard who stayed every day until the last student vanished at the end of the road. Time flowed like cold water, quiet, unfeeling. But sometimes, what flows away isn't truly lost. Elsewhere in the city, just a few blocks away, someone else carried a memory he couldn't shake. The student from all those years ago, the one who had taken the money from the cafeteria, laughed, filmed, and mocked Walter, was now a grown man. His name was Nathan Grayson, 25 years old, the founder of a fast-rising edtech startup chain. He was a poster child for redemption in the media, from a rule-breaking high school kid to a regional innovator leading the future of education. But no one knew the truth behind that success, that once someone had sacrificed their dignity to protect his future. For years, Nathan had quietly tried to find Walter again. But Walter didn't use smartphones, had no social accounts, and left no digital footprint. All Nathan had left was a video, a grainy clip from 7 years ago. Walter walked slowly out the school gates, carrying that old fabric bag, his eyes not looking back. Nathan kept that video, never posted it, never deleted it. Every time he wanted to talk about the past, something in him held back, like a wall he wasn't ready to climb, like a debt too heavy to speak out loud. But then came the 7th year. A major event was announced, the 60th anniversary of Riverside High School. The new board of directors sent out formal invitations to successful alumni. The list was long, but Nathan Grayson's name was circled in bold red. He was chosen as the keynote speaker, the guest of honor, to take the stage and inspire a crowd of over 1,000 students, teachers, and alumni gathered for the 60th anniversary of Riverside High. When Nathan received the invitation, he didn't respond right away. He typed, "It is an honor," then deleted it. "Thank you for this opportunity," then deleted it. It wasn't until midnight that he typed a single sentence, "I accept, but please allow me to prepare my own speech. There's a story that needs to be told." After weeks of effort, Nathan managed to track down Walter Hayes using every connection he had. That morning, the weather felt strangely unreal, like the air itself was holding its breath. It didn't rain, but it didn't shine either. A thick layer of cloud hung low over the school courtyard, like fog waiting for something that hadn't yet happened. Riverside High was packed. Celebration banners hung from every corner. Rows of chairs lined the courtyard. Students wore their best uniforms. Teachers dressed in suits and traditional outfits. Music from stage speakers echoed through the courtyard, and the guest section had filled up long before the event began. Nathan Grayson's name was printed in bold on the program schedule with the title Young Tech Entrepreneur, a symbol of the new generation. At 9 a.m. sharp, he appeared in a sharp gray suit, walking toward the podium with a confident gait. The MC introduced him. Applause rang out. Cameras zoomed in on the front row. But Nathan didn't smile. It's not the way he usually did at startup summits or media interviews. He placed his hand on the microphone, adjusted it slightly, and looked down into the crowd where rows of students looked up with admiration. Teachers who once knew him sat silent, and others who had never heard his name before leaned in with curiosity. He took a deep breath, then began with a sentence that froze the entire courtyard. "I once stole money from this school." The hum of the crowd fell into stunned silence. A few people turned, half expecting a joke. But Nathan wasn't joking. His voice lowered, steady, like someone giving testimony in court. 7 years ago, when I was a senior here, I broke into the cafeteria and took nearly $200. It was a rainy day. The door was left open, and I was scared. I was weak. I said nothing. He paused, just for a beat, then continued. And then, someone stepped forward and took the blame. Someone who didn't know me, who didn't ask questions, who never once asked for forgiveness. He simply said, "I forgot to lock the door. I'll take full responsibility." And the next morning, he walked out of that school gate, alone, with nothing but the sound of laughter and ridicule behind him. The auditorium was silent, so silent it felt heavy. His name is Walter Hayes. Nathan continued, a man most people here only knew as the old Gatekeeper. But to me, and to hundreds of others he once saved during covert military operations, he is a living legend. Colonel Walter Samuel Hayes, commander of a Special Forces unit, recipient of the National Medal of Valor in 1992. A man who didn't just protect lives, he carried entire units on his shoulders. A man who chose silence to protect the future of one lost kid. That kid was me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some teachers covered their mouths in disbelief. A few older faculty members lowered their heads, their eyes wet with emotion. The senior students, those who once joked about the old leaf sweeper, couldn't bring themselves to look at each other. And then, from the last row near the back of the auditorium, an elderly man slowly stood up. His hands trembled as he held an old military cap that faded with time. His back was still slightly hunched, but his gaze had never been steadier. Nathan saw him, paused, then spoke softly, deliberately. If I was invited here today as a symbol of success, I have to turn that title down. Because if Mr. Walter hadn't been fired from this school, I would have been, and nobody would know my name today. He stepped off the stage and walked toward the old man. The entire hall stood without command, without ceremony, not out of duty, but because no one could stay seated. Walter stood there, gripping his cap. His eyes weren't red, but still as the sea. Nathan bowed deeply, not out of guilt, but gratitude, because he knew. Walter had given up something that could never be returned, his honor, And in that moment, they all finally saw it. Walter Hayes had never really left this school. He was just forgotten. A week after the ceremony, Riverside High changed more than any staff meeting or school board decision ever could. The clip of Nathan Grayson's speech spread across social media, far beyond the boundaries of a school ceremony. News outlets picked it up. Young CEO publicly apologizes to veteran janitor wrongfully fired. 7 years ago, major platforms shared the story, accompanied by an image of Walter Hayes standing quietly, holding his old officer's cap, a symbol of calm, resilience, and silent sacrifice. The next day, the school board held a private ceremony, no cameras, no press. But this time, Mr. Walter was formally invited back, with a new title, the Keeper of Riverside High's Gate of Honor. A bronze plaque was placed beside the front entrance, right where he used to stand, each cold, rainy morning, unacknowledged. The plaque reads, Walter Hayes, former colonel, a man who silently guarded not only this gate, but the very character of a generation. When invited to speak, he stepped up just a few paces, his eyes scanning the crowd of young faces, then simply said, I don't need recognition. I only hope that from now on, when you see someone old, quiet, and unnoticed, don't look away so quickly, because sometimes they've done far more than you can ever imagine. No one spoke, only the wind whispered through the rows of flame trees shedding their leaves like nature itself, agreeing in silence. From that day on, Walter Hayes' name became a story passed from classroom to classroom. Students wrote essays about him. History teachers used his life as a living lesson in courage and compassion. One student group even restored the worn wooden bench where he used to sit during lunch breaks, now called the Hayes Bench. And every year, on the same date, he was once dismissed. The school observes Silent Day. No social media. No filming anyone without permission. And every class spends 10 quiet minutes writing notes of gratitude. To those who work quietly, unseen, yet hold up the very fabric of their school. As for Mr. Walter, he turned down every offer to be a guest speaker or an honorary advisor. He only said, I'm all right now. I just hope the kids who once laughed at me will one day know how to bend down and pick up a piece of trash, the same way I once did. He still lives in that same small apartment beside the laundromat, still walks every morning, still wipes down park benches, still cleans the nameplate on the Veterans Memorial every Sunday. But now, every once in a while, a child runs up to him and says, I know you're Mr. Walter, right? And he smiles. Not because he was recognized, but because the right thing was finally remembered. Some people spend their whole lives protecting something, yet are forgotten in just one morning. If this story made you pause even just for a moment, share it. And don't forget to subscribe, because some things deserve not to be overlooked. Respect should never begin after you learn someone's name. It should start in your heart.